Uh,
Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest. He has been on the scene for over 55 years and has played with countless greats like Miles Davis, Woody Shaw, Freddie Hubbard. There's so many. Jack DeJohnette, Keith Jarrett, Roy Haynes. He is a Grammy award-winning bassist. Please welcome Mr. Cecil McBee. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Cecil, we know you've been on the scene for over 55 years. You've played with everyone under the sun, and I believe you were from Tulsa, Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, tell us a little bit about your humble beginnings, how you got started in music, how'd you, end up playing the bass. Just curious about your humble beginnings, sir.
Humble. Let's see. During my early teen, let's say around 14, 15, I began to, more than usual, be aware of music that I heard around me in the neighborhood.
Okay.
There was a guy that was a blind guy, with all due respect, that played the guitar on a certain quarter of my neighborhood, usually in the afternoons, and occasionally a gentleman would join him on the sidewalk outside, tap dancing, and just the general vibe really touched me, and so forth. There was a quality of feeling that happened that really kind of, if you will, gave me a feeling to be jovial, happy, or even relief from what I was at that particular time. In other words, hearing and seeing something that was so creative, really touched me.
Yes.
And I was reminded that earlier I had heard, I think I was about 4 or 5 years of age. At that time, there were the old Victrolas, that played vinyl recordings. I heard this big band right in the heat of July in the summertime. Across the street, there was this music that was amazing that caught my ear.
Okay.
So all that being said, I ended up previous to graduating, if you will, from elementary school, leaving elementary school, there was a display of instruments on, all of us kids were brought to this large room where there was a display of instruments on various tables, and such that if you chose the instrument that you liked the sound of, you might be in the band now that you're going to graduate and go to middle school. Okay. I chose the clarinet.
Yeah, you started on clarinet first. Okay.
Yeah, the clarinet. And long story short, 9th grade, I was very popular. I, was seen as someone that could really play very well, better than most in the band. And so that gave me a good feeling, that I could discover some kind of popularity. Because as a kid coming up in those days, in those areas, you were more intent to survive, really. Given my family, there's very little anywhere of whatever would be necessary for, sometimes even a decent level of survival. And so anyway, now that I'm in high school, it was discovered that, during my first experience in the high school band, it was discovered that I couldn't read. I had been playing music throughout junior high school.
Okay.
Doing very well. But now that I'm among the big folks, you might say, more. Anyway, my band director, whose name was Clarence Fields, discovered that I couldn't read when he asked me to display my techniques on the clarinet on a particular tone that had favored me in junior high school. And he put the music before me and I couldn't read it. So he discovered that all along I was remembering and perhaps playing by ear, which I feel that was fundamental, basic to my beginning, my inherent qualities of playing improvised music.
Right.
Eventually. So he put me right away the next day into, clarinet lessons. And in my junior year later, I found myself after band practice putting away my clarinet in its regular compartment and suddenly discovering that there was something on the floor that I had been reaching over for about a year and a half, never noticed. But there was a bass there, an old aluminum bass. And I picked it up and pulled the string. Wow, it was wonderful. It really gave memory to sounds that I had heard in the interim. My buddy and I, James, we would hang out at the drugstore, sip a malt every now and then, put a quarter in the machine, and hear some jazz. So I picked the bass up and began playing it. And over a period of about 3 months, I've got my buddies now. We're all jamming and playing, trying to play some kind of blues, and et cetera, et cetera. So the word got out in town that there was a new bass player in town, right? So a blues singer came to the high school when we were practicing and asked me to come to play with his band. So I went with him to Wichita, Kansas on my first gig, not having any idea what theory and harmony was, what chord changes were, what scales were. I just, I guess my sensibilities, and so forth, listening and making something happen out of, realistically out of what, in my own version, out of what I had heard. I think that gave me a good opportunity to manifest something on stage, according to what was asked of me, although not perfect.
Right.
But I ended up this was in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
Tulsa, Oklahoma happens to be, to this day, right in the heart of the old Route 66, America's first highway that led from Chicago down through Tulsa all the way to LA. Nat King Cole sang about it, Route 66, right? Route 66. So there were a lot of musicians there, so I'm now rehearsing with this guy's band. He called himself Jimmy Cry Cry Hawkins. Now, if you want to hear James Brown sing, you should have heard this guy. This was before James Brown.
Okay.
This guy would he would stand, he would support himself. He would, with his right hand, standing upside down with the microphone in his left hand, supporting himself with his right hand, standing perpendicular to the ceiling, singing the blues, because my baby done gone. Right? And so I'm rehearsing with him. And a guy named Red Prasad came in and asked me, in knowing that, in having heard that we were rehearsing, asked me to play a gig with him across the street as Jimmy at Clarence Love's Lounge, which was the jazz club in Tulsa at the time.
Okay.
So that's how I got started in playing improvised music. It was absolutely wonderful because as hello,
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can't see you.
Uh-oh. I can see you.
Okay, then I should keep talking then, huh?
Can you see? You still can't. You can't see me still.
My screen is gone.
Oh boy.
My screen is gone. Let me see just a minute.
Okay.
Hold on a minute.
Okay.
Lost the screen.
Oh, there you are.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anyway, it was wonderful. I performed there throughout my senior year in high school with various groups that would pass through. And point is that although I entered not knowing anything about what it was, what the techniques of improvisation were,
Right.
theory and harmony, scales, apparently my ear helped me throughout my senior year in high school.
Mm.
When I left that club, I knew all my chord changes, entered college, and went from there.
That's incredible. All those years you were playing by ear, huh?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Now I understand. Like I said, so when you were in college, Cecil, were you doing professional gigs around town even when you were in college? Were you playing a lot with different bands during that time?
Upon entering college, quite frankly, I remind you that although I had played mostly rhythm and blues, rock and roll, at Clarence Love's Lounge, Clarence Love was a head of a big band out of the Southwestern Territories, along with Ernie Fields. You know, these were bands that, how you say, were scouted by Count Basie, Duke Ellington, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of guys went to those bands. And so anyway, what was the point? I forgot.
I'm sorry.
You asked me.
Yeah, just if you were playing with bands during that time when you were in college.
Oh yeah. What I wanted to say was that I had on my first night in my freshman dormitory at Central State University, my roommate, who was also from Tulsa, trombone player, Harry Wilson, put a record on, and the record was "Isn't It Romantic" by Chet Baker.
Okay, trumpeter.
Never heard anything like that before. I remember right away I had to have that. So, as a music major, I wanted to return to Tulsa and take charge of the big band of my high school. That was my fantasy. So I studied. I studied very seriously music. Techniques that were given to me, and of course, one class that I loved the more. There were two. One was advanced music that featured Bartok, Beethoven, etc., and the other was theory and harmony.
Okay.
Because now I could understand better what I was doing on the instrument, and I would apply these things to the instrument.
Yes.
So as things turned more favorable towards me as a performer, I ended up with the better group on campus. To answer your question, playing gigs around Dayton, Ohio, around the general area of my college, and I supported myself that way by playing the instrument. So I think I was doing pretty good at the time.
Fantastic. Now, Cecil, I know that you went into the military. You were in for a couple of years, and I understand that you conducted the band at Fort Knox. Tell me about that, man.
I laugh because my buddies, folks like Kirk Lightsey. Have you heard of Kirk Lightsey, pianist?
No, I'm not familiar with him.
We were in the army together, but
Uh-huh.
uh, I was, because of lack of funds, I ended up in and out of school for uh, 4.5 years.
Okay.
I would drop out of school for a month, work. I washed cars, I worked in restaurants, I swept floors, I did everything in return. And until my junior year in college, I was drafted because I had not finished college. They had the draft at the time.
I got you.
So I ended up at Fort Knox, Kentucky,
Hmm.
in the 158th Army Band,
Mm-hmm.
which was comprised, if you will, of 43 members,
Interesting.
out of which 40 were jazz musicians.
Okay.
Well, now that I'm playing the bass, I chose the clarinet to get into the military band, as well as the other guys had done. There were piano players, there were bass players, there were all kinds of things happening there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a perfect environment for me because I could, your responsibilities were only between 8 in the morning and 5 in the evening. After that, you had time off.
Right.
So I met a gentleman in a guy whose name is Gus Namath, who had studied the bass classically and taught me various disciplines on the instrument that really excited me.
Wow.
So I spent every evening that I could during the rest of my term in the Army practicing.
Interesting.
And in the meantime, Kirk and I would adventure into Louisville and play gigs, further developing our skills. Kirk Lightsey was out of Detroit. Detroit being the home of, Paul Chambers, Elvin Jones.
Yeah.
At the time, Motown was there.
Exactly.
And so, we became the closest of friends. So upon concluding my service, I went back to school, got my degree, and went to Detroit, met Kirk there.
Mm.
And we played as a duo for about a year,
Mm-hmm.
which gained popularity rather rapidly, if you will. And we drew people there throughout the weekend. Every night, the place was just about packed.
Mm-hmm.
It's where I met Aretha Franklin before she became Aretha Franklin.
Wow.
Barry Harris and Elvin Jones. One evening, a guy named Bob Cranshaw showed up
Yeah. Bassist Bob Cranshaw. That's right.
because he was in town with Sonny Rollins. Came in, even Tony Williams, people like that would come and listen to us because we were like the hot thing going on in town.
Wow.
So Bob Cranshaw said, "Man," he says, "I really, hear what you're trying to do." He says, "If you ever come to New York, take my card. I'll have a place for you."
Wow.
A guy by the name of Paul Winter and his jazz folk song quartet, sextet, came through town and hired me and Freddie Waits,
Yeah, Freddie Waits.
and,
Wow.
and took us to on a tour to Virginia and Washington, D.C. And in the meantime, I had contacted Bob Crenshaw and told him, let him know what was happening. He already now had set up a place for me in New York, so I moved right in, and that's how I got to New York.
Man, that's incredible. Now, I guess not long after that, you were working with Dinah Washington. Man, tell us about that. Wow, that's incredible.
Well, this was before I went to the Army.
You worked with her before? Oh, wow.
Yeah, before I went to the Army. I was out of school, quite right. What's that? My junior year, summer. I'm now, although I had worked various jobs to get through school, there was nothing available at that particular time. I remember in Dayton, Ohio, my buddy and I, Paul Miller, uh, we had to depend on his aunt to bring us food from her job, you know, and and so it was just sort of a trying moment
Yeah.
that I remember quite clearly, of course. But anyway, a guy named Philip Wright, who was a pianist at Central State College, which is where I went to school,
Right.
had taken a liking to what my prospects were. So he called me and says, McBee, I got a gig in Washington, D.C. for you, playing with Melba Liston and Shahid Shahab.
Hmm.
I never knew anything about these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. We're gone again. Let me see. Wait a minute. Yes.
I can see you now. You can't see me?
Yes. Let me see. This might work. Hold on.
Okay, no problem. Take your time. I'm with
Okay. I am the world's greatest genius at computers.
you.
Reggie Bergman, huh?
Yeah. I talked to Ron Carter on, let's see, Monday. He told me to tell you hi. He says, give all those guys an air hug. I had Reggie Workman, Ron
Yeah.
Carter, and Buster Williams on the show.
Oh, you had them all together? Oh, you're
Not
separately.
all together, yeah, separately. And Ron says, give all those guys a hug for me. And even a young bassist, John Patitucci, was on a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Wow. Let's see now if I got it. Are you still there?
I'm still there, sir. I'm still there. Take your time. Seriously, I'm still here.
Okay.
The funny thing is that I can see you and hear you just fine.
Okay. I know what to do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
See?
So I was thinking about,
Yeah, we were talking about how you got to play with Dinah Washington.
yeah. And so I ended up playing in DC with that group for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I guess I must have been pretty okay because there were, no complaints. Although I realized that, patience had got me this far, given that I was developing.
Right.
But I'm now sort of at the end of the gig, trying to gather a little bit more money to get back to Dayton so I can re-enter school and graduate.
Right.
And so anyway, when I did get back to school, how did that turn out? Oh yeah, as I said, the draft had, at that time, if you had not finished college in 4 years, you had to go to the army, you'd be drafted. So I was drafted into the military service. And,
Wow.
So what I wanted to say before, that when in DC, that's how I got hired by Dinah Washington.
Oh, okay.
I was hired by her. And because she was friends with Melba Liston,
Listen, the trombonist. Yes.
trombonist, right? So I ended up with Dinah, if I can get this straight, for about 2.5 months when we were in Philadelphia.
Okay.
And we were playing at a place called the
This is in Washington, D.C., you said?
no, this was in Philadelphia,
Okay. Okay.
and I'm forgetting now. It was a jazz showboat,
Okay.
and yeah, there was a horseshoe configuration
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, where the bandstand would be centered. People would sit around the bandstand
Okay.
and enjoy themselves. 2 blocks away was a place called the Showboat where Miles Davis was playing.
Right. Wow.
Train, Cannonball, et cetera, et cetera.
Whew.
And they were on a break and were sitting right at the front of that horseshoe. You know, I didn't know any, you know, I heard about these guys. I didn't know anything about what Miles Davis, all that. I knew about Paul Chambers because I had been attracted to him in college, you know.
Right.
I didn't know what the heck was that. So I recall quite clearly in the dressing room, Dinah was playing the piano, and about 5 minutes before we would play. And on the top of the piano was a fifth of bourbon, right? And occasionally she would sprinkle a bit into a glass and sip a little bit. Now, I had never seen anything like this before, you know.
Right. Right.
You know, I had been told that you don't do anything with funny cigarettes or drink or anything like that because that was against my religion
Right.
at the First Baptist Church. And but she was playing the piano, and I recall quite clearly she was very capable there. She played very well,
Wow.
but she'd sip, you know, after every phrase until we were now announced to enter the stage. So she got up and we followed her out, and I assumed my position at the bass. And at the time, What a Difference a Day
Yes.
makes was popular. And she had planned to open with that. So the signal was, what a difference, and she would bring her hand down and we would play in tempo, right? So the tune was in B flat major, and I was to play a certain tone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she brought her instrument down, I played my C major, C minor, and things sounded awful.
Oh,
She
boy.
turned around and looked at me, and she literally, profanity was just, I had never heard it been called.
In the middle of the performance, she cursed at you?
Performance. Yeah, she really laid it on.
Wow. Oh, boy.
And people, you know, especially Miles's group, they were down on the, you know, like this laughing.
Oh, you could see them? Oh, wow.
The whole crowd, they knew who Dinah was. It was like, you know, come on, you know, but I didn't know what that was.
Oh, wow.
So she lit into me for about 3 or 4 minutes, calling me different explicit names, you know. And
She actually stopped the performance and cursed you out?
she did.
Oh, wow, Cecil. Wow.
And so I stood silently and watched her. You know, the way I was raised, you know, you don't respond to anything like that. You just, you know, take, you know, cognizance of what's going on and make adjustments. That's how you're going to, you know, survive. So, but I felt not too bad about it because this was my opportunity. In other words, 3 days before that performance, I had been called into the service.
Oh, okay.
Right? And I didn't know, as a young kid, I had no idea how I was going to tell her that I had to leave and go to the service. You know?
Wow.
So at the end of the performance, I told her, I said, Dinah, I said, I understand that we have a gig in Queens tomorrow, and at a certain time, et cetera, et cetera. She said, yeah, and make sure that you be on time. She said a couple of other explicit things to me. I said, yes, ma'am.
Oh boy.
And then I went to the Army.
And that was it. You never played with her again or saw her again.
What I did was that the fact that she embarrassed me to that extent, I just went to the Army, and when she arrived in Queens, I was not there.
Oh, she was expecting you to be there. Oh, just think what she must have said when she didn't see you there.
Well, it didn't matter to me because you're not going to insult me like that. I don't care who you are.
I got you. Wow. And she died young too. I think she passed away, Cecil, in like 1963. She didn't. She had a short life, you know.
Yeah, she ended up in Detroit, I believe.
But I was going to say during that time, even let's move into the 60s. I mean, you played with a lot of amazing people. Now, did you record or do a couple of gigs with Miles Davis? I was reading that you briefly played with him.
Oh, I didn't record with him.
Okay.
Similar situations occurred as it had been with Dinah Washington.
Gotcha. Okay, I understand. Yeah, but a lot of great recordings you were on. You know, one of my favorites is when you hooked up with Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock. You were on Wayne's recording, etc. You had an incredible bass solo on that. I mean, your work on that was unreal. And also the pianist Andrew Hill, who I consider a genius. You were on his recording Compulsion. That's one of my favorites also. Just all your work you were doing during that time. I'm like, man, who is this young bass player? Cecil McBee. I started seeing more of you. And then when I really got into Cecil McBee is I had a friend, he says, hey, man, I got a recording that you'll really like. Baddest bass player you'll ever hear. I says, yeah, sure. And it was this album here, Themby, Pharoah Sanders. Yeah, Pharoah signed this for me. And
he did?
Yeah, he signed it. And I heard you on here. I says, oh my gosh. I said, is this the same guy I listened to before? I mean, like I said, I'm in my 50s, so I kind of discovered this stuff later. But when I heard it, I'm like, man, this guy Cecil McBee is incredible. And it just grew from there. And then he turned me on to another album that you were on that you did with Charles Tolliver, Jimmy Hops, Music Inc.
Yes, I love that.
Your solo on here on the Nile blew my mind. When I heard it, I'm like, this has got to be the baddest bass solo I've ever heard. I said, man, this guy Cecil McBee is just, and I was hooked. From there, I got everything that you were on. I mean, when you recorded with Chico Freeman, when you recorded with McCoy Tyner, different people, Norman Connors, you were like on everyone's record. And
what was going on from the moment I entered New York City here now was an opportunity for me to simply express myself.
Yes,
I had found this tool, this instrument that spoke in manner in ways that I could not verbally tell my stories.
Yes,
and so it was all about how I felt. The Themby album was, quite fortunately, before the first tune to be recorded, Farrah, we were now going to take tape one, and Farrah said, "Stop," what was going on, and said, "Cecil McBee, play something out front." Before we start the tune, before we enter the tune. So I said, okay. And I just closed my eyes and went to my apartment where I practiced and would express myself, freely, given the moment. And that's how that came about. And so the response to that gave me reason to play that way from now on, because what a great opportunity to speak in that way. On the other side of words, which didn't quite favor what I wanted to say.
Yeah, your bass playing was just so original. I says, man, you didn't sound like anyone. You were so original. Sometimes I could listen to recordings or some Blue Note recordings and say, oh, that's Ron Carter. Oh, that's that person. But with you, it was just such a distinct sound. And I think I talked to Stanley Clark years ago, and he even mentioned how you were an influence on him, the way that you played. But back in 1977, I believe, you came up with a really nice recording, and I ran into you. I saw you in 2013, and you signed this album for me. It's a favorite of mine, Passion.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
this work. And I would just buy albums like anything that I saw your name on. I said, if Cecil McBee is on it, I want it because I knew it was going to be like really good. But yeah, even the stuff that you did with Chico Freeman, as I said, was good. This is another one that you're on with Chico. I like the recording a lot.
Yeah,
And
she had become the greatest friends at that time, so we sort of collaborated.
do you still keep in touch with him? How's he doing?
No, we lost contact a few years back. He's been in Europe for a while, and occasionally I hear of activity.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, here we go again.
This is oh, you having issues? Okay.
Yeah, yes. That'll be it. Yes.
Are you back? Okay.
Hang on. Take my time. Yes.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Okay. And this one also, Cecil, is a favorite of mine. The Leaders.
Yeah, the Leaders. That was a great group.
Man, that was a fantastic group. You had a lot of, the late Arthur Blythe, and there was so many great people on Lester Boyd. Yeah, this is a fantastic recording. So many great artists on here. Now, you did, I believe in '87, didn't you win a Grammy with Blues for Coltrane?
Yeah, McCoy Tanner.
Yeah, McCoy Tanner. That was a really, really good one. And yeah, also you did. This is the one that I like. This is one of my all-time favorites. That you.
I have a fan here. I'll tell you.
Unspoken.
Yeah, Unspoken.
That was good. That came out, I think, in '95 or '96.
Yeah, unfortunately, people haven't really, had an opportunity to listen to Unspoken.
Yeah.
Unspoken meant to me at the time, and yet means to me that I'm yet to be heard as composer.
Wow. And see, so that's one of the things that I was just about to bring up. Not only am I in love with your bass playing, but man, you're one of the most prolific composers that I've ever heard. And you know who you remind me of? Not necessarily the way that you write, but you remind me of Charles Mingus, where your compositions go way far beyond your bass playing. Even if you didn't play bass as a composer, I just think your stuff is just incredible. And it made me think about pianist Andrew Hill. Alfred Lyon from Blue Note was saying there were 3 pianists that he loved that just knocked him out. He says Thelonious Monk, Herbie Nichols, and Andrew Hill. And I feel like you're like that on the bass. You're just one of the giants on the bass. Everyone knows Ron Carter. Everyone knows, but Cecil McBee is one of the best.
Well, when I stepped back, when I entered New York City, I was still at the piano as composer, past having developed skills in college through Detroit. I did a lot of writing when I was in Detroit before I came to New York.
Yeah.
And, so I had in mind that I was going to return to college and get my master's.
Yeah.
But so much activity took place, there was no need to consider survival to any extent because things were really happening very, very fast. And I was rather comfortable. So in my first apartment there on 10th Street between B and C, I had a piano where I wrote my first composition that Charles Lloyd recorded on the second side of Forest Flower called Song of Her.
Right. Wow.
And so that kind of like gave me a bit of attention as composer.
Yeah.
Forest Flower was the first jazz album to sell over 1 million copies.
Wow.
This was with Jack DeJohnette, myself, Keith Jarrett.
Oh, that's right. It was like, what, 67, 68 or something like that? Yeah. I think I may even have that too. Now, I was going to ask you, like I said, in regard to your career, who are some of your influences on the instrument?
Paul Chambers.
Paul Chambers, okay.
That was it.
Paul Chambers. It's interesting.
I say it like that because, as I mentioned before, quite frankly, I'm an expressionist.
Mm-hmm.
My dire, if you will, need to play the instrument was to express myself.
Right.
As a young kid in Oklahoma, in that neighborhood where little was to positivity was to experience,
Mm-hmm.
I knew quite early that I wanted to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Something I needed to say. Uh, uh, that were right, next to our home was a series of 5 railroad tracks. This was the main artery from west to east or east to west out of Tulsa. I remember crossing that, area, standing in the middle of the track, looking straight down and, wishing that I could go that way and find peace of mind and so forth, an increasing need to express myself as eventual adult person. Mm-hmm. So now that I'm in New York and I've pretty well acquainted with myself with the piano and various approaches to various areas of the piano that would give me reason to play that would give me reason to answer that with another phrase, another sound, mm-hmm. which would keep me and so forth, some kind of like joy being found or relief from something that I didn't feel good about.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would find myself a lot at the piano, expressing myself, finding if anything happened to me that wasn't cool or that was very, very cool, I would write about that.
Interesting.
Like Roy Haynes would say, music is my therapist.
Yeah.
So that's how I began writing. It was all about, an experience, the documentation of experiences, personal experiences that would manifest through musical tones collected for one reason or another. Mm. So to this day, I do that. And there's a recording that I did called Alternate Spaces.
Okay. That
happened before Unspoken.
Really?
This was my second recording.
Is this on CD? Is it out? Is it on CD?
It's on CD, but this was a long time ago.
Okay.
Small company, India Navigation, that never really got produced, as well as my first album out of Strata East called Mutima.
Yes, yes.
Unspoken gave me the opportunity to really stretch out harmonically and theoretically, if you will, and so forth, developing what I thought would be what I intended to be unique to myself. That is, when you this music is about really how you treat the tonalities.
Yeah.
It's how you relate them. In jazz, for the most part, emanating from the blues, generally the tones are lowered. You lower the tones, because when you lower, you get a feeling of maybe a bit of sadness, a bit of sad joy. But when you raise the tones, then that might suggest, an escape from that or an intent to find sunshine.
Yeah.
How you manipulate the tones on the piano can provide unique ways of expressing yourself, which is what I do. If a chord sounds good to me, after I've written it down, I will try to respond to it. and
Mhm.
continue to respond and continue to respond regardless of the form until I'm satisfied with that particular elongated moment, if you will. And then I will call that a tune and I'll write the melody about that. So that's what Unspoken was about. I had the opportunity to really stretch out and express myself on a level that I think was very satisfying in terms of the result of my effort.
Fantastic recording. Now, Cecil, I wanted to ask you about this group you've been playing with for a number of years, the Cookers. I know that you guys were in my area not long ago. I think it was last year in Baltimore at Keystone Corner. And
Yeah.
I missed that performance, but I caught you guys before. But tell me about that group, man. How did that whole thing come together? Because I saw you guys perform at the Mid-Atlantic Jazz Festival back in 2013. I believe that's with trumpeter Eddie Henderson, Dr. Henderson, and Billy Harper, you guys, and Jabali, Billy Hart. Tell me about that group, man. How did it come together?
Well, David Weiss, trumpet player,
Okay.
called me and asked me if I was interested in, I would be interested in performing
Uh-huh.
the group, which is what I did. But as I understand, at one time, Freddie Hubbard recorded oh, what's wrong with this thing? Here we go again.
It's okay, man. It's okay. It's a joy to talk to you. I have all the patience in the world.
Let's see if I can improve on this thing here.
Okay.
Ah.
Got it?
Yeah, so, Freddie Hubbard did this record called Night of the Cookers. And
Yes.
this gave
I think
David
Lee Morgan was on it with him too, wasn't it? Lee Morgan.
I'm not sure. But I think so.
Yeah, it was two trumpeters. Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe 1959 and 60. Lee Morgan was on there with them.
Yeah. So they cooked. And so David put us together, and we, as seasoned veterans, and it's been quite a joy. I've been happy to have contributed 4 or 5 tunes of my own, as well as George Cable's,
Mhm.
who is at Billy Harper
Yeah.
and Billy Hart. All of us have contributed compositions that have made the group work.
Beautiful.
There's so much diversity collected as experiences along with composers. So it's really been quite a blessing for me and a great opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. McBee, I want to thank you so much for this interview. Man, you're a treasure. Love your music. Love you. Everything that you've done over the years. And hang on, don't leave. I'm going to close out the show.
Okay.
As the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.